Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Ako po si Ellie San Luis ng Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau. Sa ating participants ngayon sa Zoom and via Facebook Live, welcome to our 91st Consumer Care webinar session. Bago po tayo magsimula, we would like to give some reminders. Unang-una, ang ating webinar session ay recorded. By continuing your participation in the meeting, you're also consenting that you may be recorded. We are encouraging you to stay until the end of this webinar at samahan niyo po kami hanggang alas 12 at sabay-sabay tayong matuto sa topic natin ngayong umaga. Ang mga susunod na reminders ay para po may siguro natin na smooth ang atin ng webinar session. Una po, please change your display name format to consumer_complete name or company name_complete name. This is for identification purposes and to properly identify you just in case may questions po kayo during our question and answer later. Pangalawa po, please turn off your microphone and video during the webinar session unless you are requested by the moderator to speak. Para po ma-avoid natin ang distractions during the presentation proper. Pangatlo po, if you have any questions and or comments, we are encouraging everyone to click the raise hand button to directly address the speaker during the question and answer portion to make our webinar interactive. Or you may send in your questions through the chat box. And lastly po, para po sa mga naka-touchscreen devices, please avoid drawing or making annotations on the screen para hindi may distract ang ating speakers at iba pang mga participants. So let us begin this webinar session by saying the Philippine National Anthem to be followed by the invocation.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, ewas ang sinakalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ang bagaw, ay hinatang tulang awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iingin, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pamay di magdidinig. Luman ang araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Loving Heavenly Father, we come to you this hour asking for your blessings as we gather together in this webinar. May your blessings of wisdom and guidance be upon us all through the sharing and impartation of knowledge and skills by our resource speakers, facilitators, and moderators. Bless also the participants so that they would be able to glean the information from this activity and share what we have learned in the spirit of your generosity. Lord, we bring you our prayers, our commitment, our gifts to you this day. Let us who have a keen dedication and awareness of your creation have courage and conviction that we are able to contribute to the sustainability of the earth. Inspire us as we make choices so that we will recognize the impact of our lives have on our environment and our human family around the globe. Pour out your blessing upon us today, Lord. May each of our actions reveal our awareness that we are partners with you in the creation and sustainability of this earth that you have given to us to appreciate and enjoy. We ask this in the name of your Son. Amen.
Once again, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Ellie San Luis from the Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. sa ating pong 254 participants sa Zoom and sa mga nanood po ng Facebook Live. Good morning po, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. So for a brief recap lang po, last week we had the Philippine Statistics Authority for the online application of civil registry certifications, and we also had the Department of Transportation and Department of Health for the IATF policies and quarantine protocols on returning OFWs. So both sessions po talaga were really informative and our participants didn't waste time and asked a lot of questions. So today po, we have our 91st Consumer Care webinar session and our topic is about Deceptive and Unfair Sales Act and Practices. We hope that marami po kayong matutunan today. And of course, take the opportunity po sa lahat po ng ating mga participants to ask your questions during our question and answer portion. Okay, but before we begin, to formally start our session for today, I would like to call on the Officer in Charge Assistant Director of the Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau, Ms. Marie Camille B. Castillo. Good morning po, Ms. Camille.
Yes, good morning LA. Salamat at magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Mabuhay everyone. Good morning to all of us. And this is our pang-ilan? Pang-ilan na natin? LA?
91st po, ma'am.
How many?
91st, 91.
91st, no? So 91st. Malapit na tayo maging centennial. And we are very happy that we continue to do these webinars for you. Sa inyo po ito, sa ating mga consumer. And once again, we have another very important topic that we'll be discussing so that kayo po, mas maintindihan nyo po whatever your rights and responsibilities are pertaining to this topic. So our topic is on deceptive sales, no? And alam ko po, it's a bit difficult to understand what deceptive sales is. Ano ba yan, deceptive sales? Kasi naman po, pag sinabi natin deceptive, it's panloloko po. Panloloko siya. And it's one thing na ayaw natin mangyari to ourselves and to anybody sa ating pamilya, sa ating kaibigan, sa ating mga kaopisina. No? Ayaw na ayaw po natin may nangyayaring ganyan yung panloloko. But let me show you po. Statistics lang po. No? So, mag-share lang po ako ng isang slide. This one. This came from the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau of the Consumer Protection Group. Lakihan ko lang po. It shows us what are the complaints that we receive, no? The Department of Trade and Industry received, particularly from the NCR. Sandali po, ayaw mag-slide. There. And from January to March, there are a total of already 3,911 complaints. And on your left, it shows you what are the nature of complaints have we received, no? Through online, no? Through online businesses. And ang pinakamadami po natin na-receive is on deceptive, unfair, or unconscionable sales act or practices. These are instances where our consumers have been duped or na loko, no, sa kanilang pagbili, sa kanilang pagpili ng produkto at serbisyo. And this is an alert for us, no, for the Department of Trade and Industry. Actually, it's our Undersecretary, Attorney Ruth Castello, who made sure that we have another webinar for this type of complaint. Para po mas maintindihan natin, no, we'll be able to understand more and fully what this type of complaint is and how would we be able to avoid them and what can we do when we are in that instance or circumstance. So our rights today on information and education we will practice and you will be helped by the Department of Trade and Industry to make sure that you'll be able to learn and understand something today about this nature of complaint. And we thank you, the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau, pagdating po sa was this yung pag-explain ng ating provisions ng Consumer Act. Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau is always there. No? They help us in making sure that our consumers are have the information, have the information and have the this understanding and also have this skill so that they will know how to react and how to act, no, when they are in this kind of circumstance. So please listen, please learn. We have very able speakers for today, our good friends from FTER. And we hope you could ask your clarifications, your questions para po mas maintindihan pa natin at mas malaman pa natin paano natin tutugunan on this kind of circumstances kapag nandiyan na po sa harap natin. So, we hope that you'll be able to learn a lot. Magstay po kayo until 12 noon. And thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you, LA.
Thank you so much po, Miss Camille. So, yun nga po, it's very alarming that we have 8,000 complaints sa online lang po ito, deceptive practices po from January to March. So, I think it's very timely po na ngayon po, ito po ang ating webinar. And we are very privileged and thankful po for the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau for being our speaker for today. So, our speaker for today is a graduate of Bachelor in Computer Science at the University of the Philippines, Visayas in 2002. She took up law at the University of San Agustin in Iloilo City. She took the bar exams in 2006 and passed the bar in 2007. She is a lawyer for 14 years. She was previously connected with an American consulting firm and a non-government organization. She is currently an attorney for at the Adjudication Division of the DTI Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau. To begin her presentation, without further ado, I would like to welcome Attorney Richie Torrio. Good morning po, Attorney.
Good morning po. Thank you po, Miss LA and Miss Camille. Good morning to all the participants sa Zoom and mga nasa FB Live sa Consumer Care. I would like to apologize. I have to turn off my camera to save on bandwidth. So if it's okay, so let me start by introducing to all of you briefly the masterpiece of legislation. So yung mag-share po ng slide, Miss LA, kaya na lang. Yeah, yeah, right.
Morning, Attorney Richie.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me start by introducing to all of you briefly the masterpiece of legislation which embodied the state policy on deceptive, unfair, and unconscionable sales acts and practices. RA 7394 or Republic Act 7394 or the Consumer Act of the Philippines advances the protection against deceptive, unfair, and unconscionable sales acts and practices, as well as promotes the provision of information and education to facilitate sound choice and the proper exercise of rights by the consumer. So we have this chapter on the Regulation of Sales Act and Practices in the Consumer Act. So next slide, please. Thank you. So it is therefore a policy of the state to promote and encourage fair, honest, and equitable relations among parties in consumer transactions and protect the consumer against deceptive, unfair, and unconscionable sales acts or practices. When, when we speak of deceptive, when we speak of deceptive, there was deception or fraud involved, while unfair and unconscionable sales acts involve unethical or excessive or outrageous acts without which we would not have been encouraged to buy or avail of the goods and services offered. So, ganun po. Meron po tayo declaration of policy sa Consumer Act. Next slide po. Thank you. So when the sales acts or practices appear to be deceptive, unfair, and unconscionable, the implementing agency is the Department of Trade and Industry that shall enforce the provisions of the Chapter on Sales Act and Practices under RA 7394 or the Consumer Act of the Philippines. So kung yung product mo ay or yung service na nabili mo is deemed deceptive, unfair, and unconscionable, ang jurisdiction po niyan or ang implementing agency po niyan is under ng Department of Trade and Industry. Next slide. So when is an act or practice by a seller or supplier in connection with a consumer transaction deemed deceptive? Article 50 of the Consumer Act provides that an act or practice shall be deemed deceptive whenever the producer, manufacturer, supplier, or seller, through concealment, false representation, or fraudulent manipulation, induces a consumer to enter into a sales or lease transaction of any consumer product or service. So when we say inducement, it means encouragement or temptation or bait. We were encouraged or tempted to buy a certain product or service, so we fell into a trap because of the seller's false representation or concealment or fraudulent manipulation of that product or service. So ano-ano po yun? Paano po natin malalaman na isang panloloko na ang ginagawa ng seller sa atin? So, next slide po. Pero bago po muna natin talakayin yung let us differentiate the manners of inducement which are deceitful. We have concealment, like again sinabi ko kanina, we have concealment, false representation, or fraudulent manipulation. So how do we distinguish these terms from the other? Actually, may ang Supreme Court na sa isang case, define deceit, sa deceit pa lang, dinefine ng Supreme Court, deceit as the false representation of a matter of fact, whether by words or conduct, by false or misleading allegations, or by concealment of that which should have been disclosed, which deceives or is intended to deceive another so that he shall act upon it to his legal injury. So, pag sinabi nating may concealment, as a seller, kung ikaw ay in good faith, kailangan mo dapat i-disclose na second hand yung binibenta mo o kaya imitation lang yung binibenta mo. Pero ang pinapalabas mo ay brand new or original ang produkto na yan. Deceptive na ang pamamaraan ng pagbenta mo. Remember, inducement occurs before, during, or after the transaction. So, next slide po. So ano-ano ulit yung mga instances when a sales act or practice is deemed deceptive under Article 50. So tandaan niyo po sa Article 50 ng Consumer Act of the Philippines, andyan po nakanarate lahat ng instances when a sales act or practice is deceptive. So first, a consumer product or service has the sponsorship, approval, performance, characteristics, ingredients, accessories, uses, or benefits, but in truth, it does not have those. Iyang example, yung nakita nyo sa picture. Actually, charger yan na binibenta, original charger daw. Pero nung binili and ginamit na, uminit ng bongga yung charger. If one is to continue using this charger, siguro nagkaroon na ng sunog because nag-overheat. Kita nyo naman kung original charger yan, I don't know if this is Samsung, yung original charger niyan, ang nakalagay is 9 degrees. Hanggang 9 degrees lang siya mainit. Pero yung itong imitation ng charger, umabot ng 36 degrees. So, ang init. Dito, the product did not have the performance nor characteristics or uses that the seller represented that it has. Wala siyang sinasabing performance, no? Hindi nga siya sponsored or approved ng kung ano mang brand na to, or wala din siyang gamit or benefit kasi nasira din siya agad. So clear naman po tayo dito, I hope. So next slide po, thank you. So another situation will be is when a consumer product or service is of a particular standard, quality, grade, style, or model, when in fact it is not. Dito sa picture, nakikita nyo, parang it's a case of expectation versus reality ang nangyari. Pinili niya ang rubber shoes online. It looks nice sa picture ng seller, but when the buyer received the product, bedroom slippers ang dumating. The product is not a particular style or model that the seller is representing that it is. At diba nakikita nyo, no, chinelas lang pala siya, hindi siya sapatos. Okay, so next slide po. Next is a consumer product is new, original, or unused when in fact it is in a deteriorated, altered, reconditioned, reclaimed, or second-hand state. Actually, this situation is very classic. Ito yung binanggit ko earlier na the seller, if in good faith, should have disclosed that the product is second-hand or already reconditioned or altered. Pero hindi niya dinisclose, kinonceal niya yung fact na yun and pinapalabas niya, falsely representing that the product is brand new, original, or never been used. Or what we say now is, kung sa mga collectors, noob or never been out of the box. So, siguro dito, mura-mura itong sasakyan. Siguro, I don't know kung saan to baka sa US to na, na online shopping. But, yung dumating sa kanya, hindi pala ganun yung performance or hindi pala ganun yung state niya, deteriorated na pala. So, bebenta ka ng sasakyan sa mga dealers, tapos pinapalabas ng dealer na brand new yan, hindi nagamit, yun pala repossess yung sasakyan. So, next slide po. Thank you. The next situation will be is when a consumer product or service is available to the consumer for a reason that is different from the fact. Based dito sa picture, dati before pandemic, nauso ang mga staycations and we eagerly check for the best deals at a low price. But when we get there after a successful booking, hindi pala available ang room or place because meron nang nakabook or nag-extend pa ng booking. So, hindi natin na-avail yun. Maybe this is also true for boarding houses or those professing to the public na itong bahay na to or itong room na to ay there's a vacancy pero in truth hindi pa pala nakaalis ang dating tenant. So next slide po. This one is also another case of expectation versus reality. A consumer product or service has been supplied in accordance with the previous representation when in fact it is not. Dito kita nyo, ang ganda-ganda ng pinapalabas ni seller, yung sa left side ng picture. But when you receive the product, totally iba. Marami-rami din ang naka-experience ng ganito in online shopping platforms. Example, yung famous na salbabida na binili ni Ogie Alcacid, pero nung dumating, halos hindi siya kasya. Meron din yung isang nanay na bumili ng cabinet, ang ganda, pero nung dumating, miniature cabinet pala. So, kitang-kita nyo dito, ang ganda ng damit niya, pero pag dumating sa kanya, mukhang, yung dito sa left side, it's a gown, pero yung dito sa right side, nung dumating sa kanya, mukha siyang pang tulog. So, next slide po. So, we also have this situation when a consumer product or service can be supplied in a quantity greater than the supplier intends. Classic example will be in sending packages or balikbayan boxes. Pwede pa sana ilagay yung iba pang gusto mong ipadala sa isang box na lang. Kasi mas makatipid kayo, isang box lang ang babayaran mo eh. But according sa sales rep, since need gawing dalawang box para hindi masira yung mga nailagay mo doon. Pero actually, nabalot naman eh. Alam mo naman kung paano mo siya binalot, paano mo siya minake sure na hindi siya masisira sa loob or di mababasag o walang basagin. Wala ka naman choice but you have to follow kasi kahit na may space pa sana, pwede naman magkasya, pero sabi ng sales rep, dalawang box na. So, kahit tuwalya pa yung gusto mo sanang ipasok, hindi na kaya. So, next box na lang. So, we have this situation na the consumer product or service can be supplied in a quantity greater than the supplier intends. So, next slide po. Thank you. Another will be is if a service or repair of a consumer product is needed when in fact it is not. I also have encountered mga ganitong cases. Example would be is using a laptop. Especially this pandemic, daming gumagamit ng laptop, especially sa mga kabataan, yung walang face-to-face na classes. Ang sira lang ng laptop is external battery. Pero ang pinapalabas ng technician, motherboard ang sira. But hindi naman talaga sira ang motherboard, gumagana siya. External battery lang talaga yung problema. Actually, this is really a scam. What the customer does not know is that the technician just wants to cash in on the situation. Mag-order ng replacement for the motherboard and then charge to the customer. Pero hindi talaga papalitan ni technician ang motherboard kasi wala namang sira. And he'll keep the replacement motherboard which was already paid by the customer unknowingly. Hindi niya alam na yung binayaran niya pala yun, pero hindi naman ikakabit. Because gumagana pa talaga yung original niya na motherboard. So, all along, akala ng customer, itong motherboard niya, yun na yung binayaran niyang replacement. So, this is really deceptive. Di ba? So, next slide po. We have a situation here where a specific price advantage of a consumer product exists when in fact it is not. Dito sa kita nyo sa picture, merong tatlong same batteries, pero magkakaiba ang mga price ng ito, binenta niya nung day 1, ito yung price. Binenta niya day 2, ito yung price. Pag day 3, iba na yung price. Nung bumili ka ng day 1 or day 2, dapat pala bumili ka na lang ng day 3. Usually, this happens during a sale. Example, 5-5 sale. Bukas na yun, May 5. You buy a certain pair of rubber shoes during the sale kasi nga sale and hype na hype ang pag-announce of big discounts. But then, after the sale, nag-markdown palalo ang seller for the same rubber shoes. You thought you had a price advantage kasi it was a big event announcement. Merong 5-5 sale o kaya Mother's Day sale. And you bought the product thinking you had a great deal. But the following day or days following the event, bumaba pa mismo yung price, binaba ng seller. You no longer had that specific price advantage you thought you had when you vigilantly waited for the big sale event. Okay lang ngayon kung it's pandemic, you wait for the online apps. Yun lang yung effort mo, mag-abang ka lang sa online apps. Paano naman kung hindi pandemic? You visit a physical store, you waited long hours queuing outside. Kasi yan lang yung day na minamark nila na magkakaroon sila ng big sale. But then, after buying the product, it turns out na marami pala silang stocks which they will sell in the coming days. So, sayang effort mo, pag-abang, akala mo yun na yun, limited lang yung edition, and sayang yung effort mo pag-abang and pagpila. So, this also deceptive. So, next slide po. So we have here another situation that the sales act or practice involves or does not involve a warranty, a disclaimer of warranties, particular warranty terms or other rights, remedies, or obligations if the indication is false. So this one is also a classic case of a deceptive sales act or practice. You guarantee that there's a warranty of a particular product, but only to say na wala palang warranty or hindi covered ng warranty policy yung nature ng sira, or wala kang binigay na warranty card or walang manual, walang box. Pag ganyan, hindi po yan pwede, deceptive po yan. Kasi dapat meron niyang warranty. Bibili ka ng electric fan, wala palang warranty card, nasira, paano mo yun ipuprove na yung may warranty ka, di ba? So, ang ipapakita mo pa is receipt, yung OR. So, maghahanap ka pa, lungkad ka pa, whereas andyan sana yung warranty card. Pero we also honor the official receipt kung ikakaso nyo sa DTI kung ayaw magbigay ng replacement yung seller. So, next slide po. Another deceptive sales act or practice is when a seller or supplier has a sponsorship, approval, or affiliation he does not have. The usual examples would be when one pretends to be connected with a particular brand and acts as if it's the sales rep or representative of that particular brand, pero hindi siya totoong sales rep of that company, pero yan ang pinapalabas niya. ahente siya ng ganitong dealer pero hindi naman pala siya tunay na ahente ng ganitong dealer. So, pwede mo siyang kasuhan din dito under sa Consumer Act aside from kung gusto mo siyang kasuhan for sa criminal act. So now, ano ulit yung mga matters na kinoconceal or misrepresent? So we have to remember these things. The physical condition or state of a product, the composition or ingredients or the accessories, the uses, benefits, and the performance, the characteristics, standards, description, or specifications, the quantity, size, and the availability, the price advantage, the origin, source, or legitimacy of the seller, the warranty rights, remedies, or obligation, and the availability and the necessity of the repair. You can all find this sa Article 50 of the Consumer Act. So, tandaan nyo po yan when you exercise your rights as a consumer, at least alam nyo na itong bagay, may madali itong ma-conceal or ma-misrepresent. So, you have to be vigilant. Next slide po. Thank you. So, we have a case here. It's a landmark case decided by the Supreme Court. This was in June 8, 2016. This is the case of Autocentrum Alabang versus the spouses Bernardo. What happened here is that the spouses Bernardo bought a BMW sports car in the amount of 2.9 million from Autocentrum. In just 11 months from the time they bought the car, 11 months pa lang the spouses brought the car to a service center because the ABS brake system and steering column malfunctioned. Isipin mo, BMW sports car yan, tapos in just 11 months, nagkaroon ng mga malfunction. And then other systems of the car also malfunction. Ang dami niyang sira. The spouses now demanded for a replacement of the car or refund their payment. Yan yung sinabi nila kay Autocentrum. Replace nyo yung car or balik nyo sa amin yung pera. Kaso itong si Autocentrum, ang yabang niya pa nga parang sinabi niya, ano yan, bagong-bago yan. Ginamit pa nga yan ng ng director, ganyan. So, certified pre-owned nila yan, kaya bagong-bago yan. The spouses Bernardo ngayon, they filed a complaint for refund or replacement. Umabot ng Supreme Court. Ang sabi ng Supreme Court, this is what I shared earlier about concealment and false misrepresentation. Sabi ng Supreme Court, RA 7394 specifically provides that an act of a seller is deceptive when it represents to a consumer that a product is new, original, or unused, when in fact it is deteriorated, altered, reconditioned, reclaimed, or second-hand. A representation is not confined to words or positive assertions. Hindi lang po siya words or positive assertions. It may consist as well of deeds, acts, or artifacts of a nature calculated to mislead another and thus allow the fraudster to obtain a undue advantage. The failure to reveal a fact which the seller is in good faith bound to disclose may generally be classified as a deceptive act due to its inherent capacity to deceive. Suppression of a material fact which is a party is bound in good faith to disclose is equivalent to false representation. Kaya itong mga sellers, kailangan yung sabihin talaga kung nagamit na yung sasakyan or hindi pa. Next slide po. Thank you. So, a case where the defendant repainted an automobile, worked it over to resemble a new one, and represented that the automobile being sold was new, was found to be a false representation of an existing fact. And if it was material and induced the plaintiff to accept something entirely different from that which he had contracted for, it clearly was a fraud, which upon its discovery and a tender of the property back to the seller, entitled the plaintiff to rescind the trade and recover the purchase money. So, since may false representation dito, dapat ibalik yung kotse and isoli yung purchase money. For failure to reveal its prior registration of the car in its name and for representing an altered and second-hand car as a brand new to the spouses Bernardo, Autocentrum committed a deceptive sales act in violation of Section 50 of RA 7394. So, yun yung decision ng Supreme Court. So, next slide po. So, we are now in Article 52. Yung kanina sa deceptive, it's Article 50. Ito, Article 52 is about unfair or unconscionable sales act or practices. So, when is an act deemed an unfair or an unconscionable sales act or practice? An act or practice shall be deemed unfair or unconscionable whenever the producer, manufacturer, distributor, supplier, or seller, by taking advantage of the consumer's physical or mental infirmity, ignorance, illiteracy, lack of time, or the general conditions of the environment or surroundings, induces the consumer to enter into a sales or lease transaction grossly inimical to the interests of the consumer or grossly one-sided in favor of the producer, manufacturer, distributor, supplier, or seller. Next slide po. So what are the elements again? So we have to, ito, isa-isa natin. There's an act of inducement by the producer or manufacturer, supplier, or seller. Next is we have the subject of inducement is a consumer transaction involving a product or service. Dapat mayroong consumer transaction. The transaction is grossly inimical or contra to the consumer's interest or grossly one-sided in favor of the other party, the seller. The inducement occurs before, during, or after the transaction. And the manner of inducement could be to abuse or an act of taking advantage of any of the following conditions. Yung consumer's physical or mental infirmity, wala siyang alam, no read, no write, ignorance, illiteracy, the consumer's lack of time, nagmamadali siya, may kailangan pa siyang gawin, so parang, sige na, bilhin niyo, sige na, pero alam ko kasi nagmamadali siya eh, so alam mong hindi siya mag-check. So, the general conditions of the environment or surroundings. Alam mong pandemic, alam mong hirap yung mga tao, pero gusto mo, gusto mo pa rin siyang, gusto mo siyang, tawag dito, i-induce na bumili ng ganitong product. Kasi sabi mo nga, pandemic. So, what is inducement again? As defined by Merriam-Webster, inducement is a motive or consideration that leads one to action or to additional actions. In other words, without that consideration or enticement, we will not be tempted to buy or avail said product. And that temptation is against our best interest. Kunyari, kung hindi kanya pinilit, kung hindi kanya kinukumbinse, hindi ka matetempt na bumili. Siyempre, sales stock yan eh. Nagsi-sales stock siya sa'yo. Pero yung sales stock niya, yung tipong minamanipulate ka na para bilhin mo yung isang product. Yung alam na alam niya na hindi mo naiintindihan masyado, wala ka masyadong alam, hindi ka masyadong nakakapagtanong kasi wala kang alam, hindi mo nga alam eh kung ano yan. Pero napabili ka, that's unfair. That's already an unconscionable sales act or practice. So next slide po. Thank you. So ano-ano po yung mga instances that the sales act or practice is unfair and unconscionable? So this is under Article 52. So when you say unconscionable, it is excessive. So in determining whether an act or practice is unfair and unconscionable, the following circumstances shall be considered. Number one po is that the producer, manufacturer, distributor, supplier, or seller took advantage of the inability of the consumer to reasonably protect his interests because of his inability to understand the language of an agreement or similar factors. Hindi marunong or walang alam ang nanay sa mga nakasulat sa terms and conditions. Pero tineloy mo pa rin pagbentahan kasi gusto mo kumita eh at expense ng nanay eh. Malay niya ba kung ano yung pinipirmahan niya? Hindi niya mababasa masyado, may ano pa siya, may depresya pa siya sa mata. Wala siyang alalay, wala makapag-explain sa kanya. Eh since wala siyang alam sa mga bagay-bagay, kahit nga mismo yung batas, hindi niya alam, pinilit mo pa rin. Dito luging-lugi na ang nanay. Pinagkakitaan mo na siya nang hindi niya alam, kung anong karapatan niya bilang mamimili. Next slide po. Next is when the consumer transaction was entered into, the price grossly exceeded the price at which similar products or services were readily obtainable in a similar transaction by like consumers. Meron akong naka-encounter na ganito sa isang Facebook ad. Personally, ako mismo. And sa isang online shopping platform. Doon sa Facebook ad, naka-display talaga. Sabi niya, for only 999 each ang Tibetan copper bracelet. This professes its healing powers. Meron siyang pampakalma, ganyan-ganyan. Pero when you search that same bracelet sa Lazada, it only costs around 50 pesos by another seller. So, nag-comment ako dito sa Facebook page na to ng seller na to, yung ad na yan, yung copper bracelet. Comment ako, actually, sa page nila, sabi ko, ba't ganun? Dito, sabi nyo, 999, pero sa Lazada, 50 lang to. Ang ginawa nila, blinak nila ako. They prevented me from making a comment. I reported them to Facebook, pero Facebook did not find anything unusual. Hindi ko alam kung anong standards ng Facebook, but that is another story. You know, sellers really want to defraud unassuming and innocent buyers. So, you really have to watch out and do your research when it comes to buying things in online platforms. Even as simple as that, a bracelet lang or friendship band. Mag-check kayo, mag-survey kayo. Kung ganito sa Facebook Marketplace, ano kaya siyang price niya sa Shopee or sa Lazada or sa iba pa, Alibaba, ano pa yan. Basta i-check check nyo lagi. Compare kayo ng prices. Don't make an impulsive decision at once. So, next slide po. This one is also a case of expectation versus reality scenarios. That when the consumer transaction was entered into, the consumer was unable to receive a substantial benefit from the subject of the transaction. Gaya din ang nabanggit ko kanina about yung nanay na nag-order ng cabinet sa, di ko alam kung anong online shopping platform yun. Basta nabalita yan eh. Pero, yung dumating sa kanya miniature cabinet, just the same like this, oh, parang mukha siyang back support or parang mukhang tatami nga eh, yung ilagay mo lang sa sa sahig, ganyan na siya. But when it arrived, mas malaki pa ang palad ng tao kaysa sa upuan niya. Mukha siyang upuan ni Tambelina. So, kitang-kita mo ano pa ma-benefit mo diyan, di ba? Wala kang ma-benefit diyan. Sayang lang yung pera mo. So, next slide po. Next is when the consumer transaction was entered into, the seller or supplier was aware that there was no reasonable probability or payment of the obligation in full by the consumer. Medyo naging controversial itong ganito eh. Meron to eh. Examples, di ba, nagbenta siya ng motor na strictly on installment basis. Installment basis lang. Hindi pwede yung cash. Ito, alam na alam ng seller na kailangan ng customer yung motor. Kasi pandemic eh, kailangan niya pang negosyo sana siyang delivery. Sana, pero unstable din ang economy natin this pandemic. Ang dami nga na-retrench sa isang delivery ng sa mga delivery riders ng isang online shopping app. So, binaon na yung seller lalo ang customer sa utang and sa interest. Hindi niya pa nababayaran yung principal, luging-lugi na siya dun sa laki ng binabayad sa interest. So, mas malaki pa ang kinita ng seller sa interest kaysa sa installment. If nagbayad ng customer ng cash in full. So, ang mangyayari ngayon, hatakin ni seller ang motor. Repossess niya. Kasi hindi na makapagbayad ng monthly amortization si customer. So, tumubo na siya sa interest pa lang, nakuha niya pa ulit yung motor. So, ibebenta niya naman sa ibang tao. So, di ba? Kita niyo yung grabe yung nakuhang income ni dealer. So, that's really unfair. So, next slide po. Next is that next scenario is that the transaction that the seller or supplier induced the consumer to enter into was excessively one-sided in favor of the seller or supplier. This is the same dun sa bago lang sa previous example ko na no cash payment sa mga motor dealers. sobrang pabor sa kanila ang nangyaring transaction at the expense of the customer. So, ito din yun. Ganito din siya. Nagpo-fall din siya dito. So, next slide po. So, we reiterate what are the factors in determining unfair or unconscionable sales act and practices. They are: one, the consumer's inability to understand the language of the agreement or similar factors. Hindi na nababasa masyado ng consumer yung fine print sa terms and conditions. And alam mo naman na ganun, pinush mo pa rin siya. So, second is grossly excessive price compared to that of similar products or services. Ito talaga gusto mo siyang pagkakitaan. Umangkat ka ng ganito, kamura-mura dito sa ano, tapos minark up mo yung presyo mo ng times 3, times 5. Yun, para ka lang makakuha ng income over the expense din na ng unfair, 'di ba? Unfair at the expense of the other consumers. So next would be there's no substantial benefit from the product or services purchase. Wala ka nakuhang benefit. Next is seller is aware of reasonable improbability to pay in full. Pero wala, alam niyang kailangan mo. So pinipilit ka niyang bumili. Then the transaction was excessively one-sided in favor of the seller or supplier. So ganun po yung factors to consider in determining whether there is an unfair or an unconscionable sales act or practice. Next slide, please. So we have a case here involving unfair or unconscionable sales act or practice. This is the case of AWA Electronic Philippines Incorporated versus the DTI NCR. This case was decided by the Supreme Court in April 13, 2011. So what happened here is that based on numerous complaints against the unfair sales practices of AWA Electronic Philippines, the DTI has filed a formal charge against AWA. Na-observe kasi ng DTI, there's a common thread that a target customer is approached by AWA's representative. Usually this happens in the malls, and the customer is informed that he or she has won a gift or a giveaway. So AWA's representatives reveal that the said gift can only be claimed upon purchase of additional products. So bibili ka pa. So merong initial gift na ino-offer to a target customer, and then upon acceptance, the customer is invited to AWA store or outlet. It is at that point that the customer is informed that he or she is qualified for a raffle draw or contest entitling him to additional gift. In the same manner, the additional gift can be received only upon purchase of additional products. So, nanalo ka ng gift, pero bibili ka muna ng ibang product. In the course of enticing that target customer to purchase additional products, they are physically surrounded. Para kang nag-gang up sila sa'yo by the AWAS representatives. The purchase of additional products is not disclosed during the initial stage of the sales talk or sales pitch. The revelation is done only when the customer is already being surrounded by AWAS representatives. So what the Supreme Court said, the Supreme Court held that AWA as a seller through its representatives stationed usually in malls entice consumers into purchasing their products by taking advantage of the latter's physical or mental infirmity, ignorance, illiteracy, lack of time, or the general conditions of the environment or surroundings. This is done by misrepresenting to the consumer that he or she has won a gift or is to receive some giveaways when in truth these gifts can only be claimed or received upon purchase of an additional product or products. Again, misrepresented by AWA to be of high quality. Ibang usapan yun, kunwari high quality, pero di naman pala. So this is how AWA operates its business and not simply as a means of promotional sale. The act sought to be avoided and punished under the Consumer Act has clearly been committed by AWA. So, ganun po. Di ako sure kung nandiyan pa yung ngayon yung AWA Electronic Philippines, pero alam ko may ganitong style din dati yung mga ibang meron din yun Family First, meron din iba. Basta may mga ganitong style na nagagang up sila sa mga tao. papalibutan nila yung tao, parang i-convince yung ikaw, mahihirapan ka ngayon tumanggi sa kanila. Next slide po. Okay, so I think that's it for me. I hope that the provisions of Articles 50 and 52 of the Consumer Act, particularly on deceptive sales acts and practices, is clear to all of you, and that you understand and you can use this knowledge in asserting your rights as a consumer in your consumer transactions, especially online. Mm, I would like to stay sana for the Q&A, but I also have a prior commitment this time. But I think I will leave you to the expertise of Attorney Joseph Pamitan, who is our Division Chief of the Adjudication Division, to answer your questions. Again, thank you po and have a good day, and I hope you understand everything and you all stay safe. Miss LA.
Thank you so much po, Attorney Richie. Thank you so much po for your time po for today. So, unfortunately, Miss Richie po cannot be with us during the question and answer portion po. Pero we have the Division Chief of the Adjudication Division po. We have Attorney Joseph Pamitan. So, Attorney Richie, thank you po for educating everyone, our participants po, no, what is deceptive. I think it's very important nga po, no, as consumers, na alam po natin yung uh, mga ganitong bagay para po yung rights po natin at responsibilities natin, alam po natin talaga.
Mm-mm. Mm.
Okay po.
So, uh, Sir Joseph, kayo na po. Thank you.
Okay po, thank you po, Attorney Richie. Again, reminder lang po sa ating mga participants to stay muted unless you're addressing the speakers and moderators directly. Please be informed po na makaka-download po kayo ng copy ng presentation po ni Attorney Richie after you accomplish the client satisfaction form that will be posted in the chat box section. We encourage everyone na you can ask your questions po, para po maging interactive po ating question and answer portion. We encourage everyone to click the raise hand button so we can call you to ask directly to our speaker. Please limit po your questions to 1 to 2 only. Pwede rin nyo po isend ang inyong questions sa chat box. So, here with us today for our question and answer is Attorney Joseph Pamitan. Hello po. Good morning po, Attorney.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay po. So, yun nga po, sa ating participants, if you want to ask po, you can use the raise hand button po para you can ask personally po kay Attorney Joseph. Pero ngayon po, we will begin po sa ating chat box. So, we have our first question po, Attorney, from Venus Bayaga. So, ang question po ni Ma'am Venus is, in case of online shops wherein a customer cannot physically inspect the product, whether it is original or an imitation, you purchased believing it's original but it appears it's imitation. So, before a complaint was made, online shop was gone. So, nawala po sa platform. So, how does the DTI apprehend this kind of retailer?
Oh, well, before I start po answering your question, I'd like to thank Attorney Torio for the very good presentation and para sa lahat ng mga nanay, no, happy Mother's Day po next Sunday po. Ayan. Anyway, yung the question is nawala na dun sa platform. So as far as DTI is concerned po, but if you buy through the platforms, there has been decisions by the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau which were eventually affirmed by legal service by the office of the secretary, because sa yung decisions kasi ng Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau for online for consumer complaints, you can appeal them with the office of the secretary. So there were cases decided by the by the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau, and when appealed sa Office of the Secretary were affirmed by the Secretary saying na yung online platforms uh, are equally liable with the seller. So kahit nawala na po yung seller, if it's bought through the online platforms, we can still enforce yung complaints or yung redress through the online platforms. So we can still file through the online platforms. Yeah.
Okay po, attorney. So at least alam po natin, Miss Venus. So na meron pa rin po action si DTI regarding that. So pangalawa po, for our second question from Miss Diane Manaligod. Why are online sellers posting deceptive ads on Facebook not monitored and prosecuted? Can't DTI do multiple prior investigation on this very blatant act or acts committed, attorney?
Actually kasi, oh yeah, we can do that no, but sa dami po kasi, administratively it will be quite difficult no, but we ano naman DTI ang tawag dito, si DTI naman from time to time naggumagawa naman tayo ng mga ganyan na actions na kung nakikita talaga natin. Actually silently we're doing that. Pag nakita natin na maraming complaints about certain online sellers, we do that po no. In fact ngayong pandemic, I just don't have the data right now, pero nakikita namin pag like say for example we see na these are fake products, we call po yung mga online, like even Facebook, we call yung attention ng Facebook, and there has been a lot of takedowns no. Unfortunately kasi ngayon, we still see we kumbaga, uh, there's a law actually that DTI is spearheading no, na meron na ngayon eventually, if that law gets passed, si DTI will have yung power of on takedowns no. So parang we by ourselves no can already do that. At this point in time kasi we're still coordinating with the online platforms. So um for purposes ni ma'am, kung marami talagang ano, kasi we have to you have to prioritize also. But when we see that there are a lot of consumer complaints, ganun, si DTI normally motu proprio files cases like this, or we call yung attention ng ano, or normally what we do is we can come up with a advisories no, telling mga consumers to not to patronize or parang yun, those things. But yeah, sabi ko nga first, ang dami masyadong online sellers that we cannot really look into them one by one. But yes, we DTI acts on these complaints if and when we see na it will really affect the consuming public.
Yes po. So active naman po Miss Diane si DTI regarding nga po sa inyong question. May additional question lang din po ulit si Miss Diane. Is DTI not Okay, we'll skip na lang po. We have another question po from Juliet Banogon. If a technician claims that the motherboard is the one that's having a problem, how would an ordinary consumer say otherwise? I mean, how can the consumer argue with the technician's findings? Kasi nga po, syempre, hindi ko po alam na kung ano po ba talagang problema ng computer ko kasi hindi naman po talaga ako marunong sa mga technical. So, paano mo nga po ba ma-argue na kung tama po ba yung findings ni technician or otherwise, attorney?
Yung question is more of a ano na kasi to a procedural and evidence no, but as a lawyer pag mga ganito you have to the question is how. So normally you have to go to somebody else no, you have to go to somebody else normally who is also an expert parang ganun, or who has been there in the business perhaps for quite some time who are also doing all these things. Parang second opinion ba? Parang ganun. That's normally what you should do. And also sa ano kasi sa mga cases also filed with DTI, if you're the complainant, normally merong burden of proof sa iyo na to prove yung claim mo na naniloko ka nung nagre-repair na hindi pala ganito. So for you to be able to do that, you have to go to, part of the process is you have to go to somebody, no? Parang like say for example, a repair shop na DTI accredited, and yung tao na to who does the repair has test the certifications, no? Sinasabi niya na etong taon to is qualified to check all this and that, no? So probably you can go. So as against one repair shop saying na eto yung sira, and when you bring it to another shop or to another shop, sabi hindi naman yun yung sira. So those are evidences to controvert yung claim niya. And so on that, based on those evidence, you can now file a complaint for for deceptive sales, no? Parang yon, deceptive sales, kasi sinasabi niya parang to a certain extent mapipilitan kang ipapa-repair to, hindi naman pala siya sira. So those are what you need to do in order to be able to file up and successfully prosecute a case. Yan.
Yes po. I think as consumers po, we should educate also ourselves on our responsibilities nga din po. As attorney said na parang we should inform ourselves nga po, di ba? We have someone from our participants po raised their hand.
If you look at the Consumer Act, dun sa first parts ng Consumer Act, there is a delineation in so far as what products will be governed by its government agency. So like say for example, for Department of Health, it says there food, drugs, cosmetics, and medical devices. So that's under DOH. There are products also under DA, and there are the rest, all to a school of thought, sinasabi niya na because yung chapter na yon, chapter on deceptive sales, deceptive sales and unconscionable sales act or practices, parang sinasabi niya doon sa chapter na yun na it's only DTI, no? And it's only DTI who has jurisdiction. Kasi the product ay the issue here is in the manner by which you sell yung products. It's not really because if the issue ng consumer is whether or not this product is safe, whether or not this product toxic, whether this product is hazardous or harmful, whether this product is registered or not. So DOH yung mga yon, no? Because sila yung may expertise, they are the expert in so far as whether or not, because si ADOH can determine when they test the product, meron nga bang hazardous meron ba hazard merong side effect in so far as humans is concerned. So ang issue doon, pagka ganon, DOH yun, FDA. But kung ang issue is yung niloko mo ba yung consumer, may panloloko ba sa pamamaraan ng pagbebenta niya, then ang issue, the issue there is not toxicity, the issue there is not whether the product, it's in the manner of selling, then pasok po siya dun sa Article 50, 52, and in relation to Article 49 of the Consumer Act po, DTI, sabi ko nga po, there's school of thought na nagsasabi na kasi sa Consumer Act daw, malinaw yung delineation at the onset na pag-brand nitong products. But I think I have to subscribe to doon sa Article 49 that says na DTI has the sole jurisdiction in so far as the manner if the issue is the manner by selling, may panloloko ba, may panlilin lang ba, may panlalamang ba na nangyayari nung binentahan mo siya, nothing to do with the effectiveness of the product, then nothing to do with toxicity, hazardousness, then I think that's DTI jurisdiction po. And this is also, I think, the stand of the legal service insofar as jurisdiction is concerned. So,
Mr. Zaldi, okay na po ba tayo? Or do you have any additional questions pa po? Okay po, thank you po Mr. Zaldi. So, sa mga gusto pong magtanong directly po kay Attorney Joseph, pwede po tayo mag-raise hand. So, we have another question po from Ingimar Tupas. So, ang tanong niya po is, what about the sale of live animal? So, ang example niya po is, an expensive puppy was sold by the seller and said that the same is in good condition. On that day, the puppy was lively, but on the following day, naging matamlay and died. Could it be considered a deceptive sale, attorney?
well, ano po yan, no? Is this an actual case? Baka mamay ma-preempt naman natin yung decision. But sige, just to, pero normally kasi, like say for example, nakita ko dito marami pong participants from DTI, and I'm sure lahat ng participants dito at one point in time nagde-decide sila on cases. Yung wala pong correct or wrong answer din po, but I think it will depend on the circumstances in every case, no? Hindi kasi masyadong clear yung facts po, but para sa akin, what we have to determine is yung period, just what we look into, no, from the time ba na dineliver sa yung goods or yung product, meron ba ng substantial lapse of time for the puppy to have contracted illness doon sa during the time that it was already delivered sa iyo. So those are the things na and normally it all boils down to evidence po eh. So like say for example, in this particular case, you go to a veterinary and probably you can get a statement from the veterinary na ano yung cause ng death, ganun, to be parang to be para ba the veterinary, di ba? So kuha kang evidence sa kanya, a statement or something na yung illness could have been contracted during the time na kakukuha mo lang, parang ganun. So meron ba considerable lapse of time para makuha niya yung illness na yun, or siguro pre-existing illness ba yan? But I think insofar as deceptive sales is concerned po, sir, ang issue kasi dito is alam ba nung nagbebenta na at that time na binebenta niya may sakit na yung alagang hayop, gano'n. Sinadya niya ba yun, ganito, ganyan. So those are the things that we have to look into. But dun sa case na yun, kung talaga naman mapakita na so based on evidence na hindi dapat mamamatay yung aso the next day, then sa tingin ko baka may parang ganun. It all boils down to evidence. So we have to parang weigh yung evidence, we have to look at the facts and circumstances in every case. So yun, parang naloko ba siya, parang ganun. Parang sa akin ganito, sir, under kasi sa it's a basic right ng mga consumers to be the right to information, importante 'yon. So when there's a duty to disclose all facts and circumstances and you don't disclose these material facts that would have affected yung buyer, the consumer, whether or not to buy, and you fail to disclose material vital information, then for me that's deceptive. So pagka ganun, that transaction would have to be reversed and yung amount paid will have to be refunded po. Yan. I hope that answers.
So, importante po talaga sa ating mga participants, sa ating mga consumers na evidence really is important po when you are raising your complaints. Okay po. Next question po from Miss Lori Jane Sasote. I think this is more of a confirmation po. Ang sabi niya po is, diba, the approved sales promo mechanics should indicate the price changes and discounts on the different days, attorney?
I'll answer that in general, no. Normally kasi yung while sales promo ganito po, no, while a sales promo pertains to a different topic, but sige, I'll just para kay Ma'am Lori Jane. Ganito yung normally kasi we don't really impose doon sa to people doing the sales promotion activity kasi pa-contest nila yan, activity nila. They're free to put their things how they do it, parang ganun, that's like the mechanics. But as far as DTI is concerned, there should be very clear, no, it should be very clear kung how to win, ganito ganun, how to join, parang ganun. So there should be full disclosure in all these things, and there should be full disclosure in all these things in your mechanics, so much so that kung hindi nasunod yung mechanics, then that's a violation. So kung later on something comes out, magkakaroon ng problema not covered by mechanics mo dahil hindi clear yung mechanics mo, that should be taken again. How you appreciate yung evidence. Hindi siguro parang na-hypnotize or something, but alam nyo kasi para bang kung meron talagang clearly na enticement, and later on halimbawa kumbaga merong exaggeration, at yung exaggeration to a certain extent um, that enticed you to buy, and eventually talaga naman na wala pala yung mga benefit na nakukuha, or hindi mayroong to a certain extent. Kasi nga titingnan nga natin dito yung deception. Meron nga bang deception o ano without yung without yung representation na yun, would you have bought the product, parang ganun. To a certain extent, kung merong enticement at merong hindi supposedly, para bang if you look at kasi the provisions sa consumer, para bang dapat may truthfulness, dapat magsabi ka dapat ng totoo. So kung hindi totoo yung sinabi mo at napaniwala mo siya doon, bumili siya, or meron kang duty to disclose information, hindi mo disclose, then para sa akin pwedeng deceptive. Not really so much doon sa na ano siya, na hypnotize ba siya or something, but more of doon sa manner ng pagbebenta. Kung merong to a certain extent untruthful statements in so far as the product is concerned, then that I think that would fall on deceptive para sa akin.
Yes po. So, Mr. Jerry, so tingnan po natin yung kung yung yun nga po sabi ni attorney, enticement, exaggeration, nung pagbebenta. So, pwede pa rin po maka-affect yun. So, we have another, parang same din po ang question po ni Miss Elizabeth Santos. How about companies selling condo or house and lot? Are they covered by this act? Sometimes in pre-selling, dami po nilang sinasabing amenities. But pag na-turnover na yung unit, dami na changes sa mga amenities at compulsory payment. Attorney?
Ano po, general, ganito po, no? Yung Consumer Act po kasi parang sinasabi niya na dapat consumer product for personal, we go by the definition, no? For personal use, parang gano'n, no? Merong sinasabing Consumer Act na gano'n. Consumer products, household per personal use, gano'n. May definition po siya na gano'n. Minsan po kasi depende po, meron pong there's a gray thin line also kasi there are also other government agencies, like say for example HLURB, no. Sa akin depende po doon sa if parang Can it be covered? Yes, it can also be covered, but you might also want to look into other government agencies kasi mayroong specific government agencies like say for example HLURB. Lalo na kung ang issue is doon sa developer, no? And hindi pa yan naibibigay still with the developer. I think it would be best na you go to HLURB kasi baka mas maganda na yung HLURB because they have authority over dun sa mga developers. They can cancel yung lisensya ng developers which can force also yung hand ng mga developers uh, to settle parang ganun. I would say. I'm not saying also na walang jurisdiction yung DTI but there is sa atin jurisdiction is also dun sa facts, no? If the facts fall squarely dun sa 7394, then pwedeng DTI po. But normally kasi pag condominium yan, ganito ganyan. So hindi na i-deliver yung part ng na the things that you bought and it's against a developer. So pwede rin sa HLURB, pwede rin sa DTI, depende sa circumstances. Although um, ako personally, I would rather go to HLURB considering na they have jurisdiction over the developer. Can you imagine na kung patawan nila ng penalty yung developer, mawala ng lisensya, di na sila makapagbenta ng other na development projects nila. So that would really hurt them a lot and later on compel them to But also, pag mga ganun po kasi din, depende, pwede rin po kasi siyang estafa under the revised penal code na may kulong. May penalty for imprisonment. Medyo ba, feeling ko mas mabigat po normally yung mga ganun. So, kung iba yung pinangako doon sa binigay, doon sa biniyaran mo. So, those things we have to look into also. But yes, DTI, sabi nga natin, DTI is always there willing to take on any complaints po na pina-file natin sa DTI. Yeah.
Okay po, attorney. So, Miss Elizabeth, DTI is open naman po regarding your complaints po, pero attorney Pamitan recommends po to hopefully sa HLURB na lang po para mas ma-address po properly yung complaint nyo. Okay po. For the next question, ito po from Miss Emily Aguilar. How about those sellers from China, Taiwan, Vietnam na deceptive rin ang strategy nila? Paano po kaya natin makokontrol yun, attorney?
Yung jurisdiction natin has limits, no? We can only enforce yung general rule, no? We can only enforce yung laws natin within our territorial jurisdiction, no? But ako kasi pag mga ganyan, number one is we have to check kung meron bang before we buy we have to check kung meron bang offices yan dito sa Pilipinas, no? Normally kung wala pong ganun na I think I discourage people from buying because while DTI can provide redress, no, there are limits to doon sa redress that we can provide. Like say for example, territorial limitations. So hindi natin pwedeng ipadala yung summons sa kanila for us to be able to obtain jurisdiction over the person of the respondent, no? So para sa akin, we only buy sana dun sa mga stores dito sa Pilipinas, no? Marami naman tindahan dito sa Pilipinas where we can buy. Kung yung mga yan, if there are complaints sa DTI, and these are nagbebenta sila to platforms, we can call yung platforms and normally yung platforms can take them down, no? Kung talaga na yung mga binebenta nila are hindi fakes or counterfeits or we can do that. But balik muna bago tayo bumili kasi doon sa mga outside, no? Or pwede naman bumili outside pero yung mga alam natin na legit na nandoon, no? Kasi may issue kasi later on sa redress kung these are outside the territorial jurisdiction of the Philippines.
Okay po, attorney. So, Miss Emily, we encourage nga po, di ba, na all consumers po, sa ating participants po today, all consumers we have to really inform ourselves. We still have that responsibility nga po na alamin po yung mga ah, produkto o mga bagay po na magiging deceptive. So, meron din po jurisdiction si DTI pero yun nga po if online platforms nga po baka pwede pa rin po try to resolve your complaint. So, and support local po. Sana po. Support local po muna. Local products po within the Philippines nga po before others. Next po from Mr. Ryan Amante. Is it unlawful for the seller if they said to the buyer beforehand that the item has no warranty and the buyer has no choice but to accept it because they don't know that there is an implied warranty in every product? Attorney?
Um, I think that yung question mo is ang tawag dito is answered squarely by Article 59 letter Article 50 letter I ng Consumer Act. The Sales Act or practice involves or does not involve a warranty, a disclaimer of warranties. So kung ganun po, then I think that's a violation po. That's a violation. Wala pong produkto dapat na hindi covered ng warranty. At least man lang po merong warranty po 'yon dapat. Hindi pwede pong wala. No? As a general rule po. Lalo na especially pag brand new kasi hindi naman pwede na bumili ka tapos the next day di mo pa. Pero ganito po no. Kay may ano po kay even if the seller says na there's no warranty, eventually kung nasira yung produkto na yan at sa short span of time, you can always and always file po sa DTI ng case. Not pwede po no under the provisions on dun sa warranties po or under po dito sa deceptive sales po. Kasi po hindi ibig sabihin na wala siyang warranty na hindi ka na pwedeng magsampa ng kaso. Meron po, lalo na kung yung produkto po talaga ay defective po talaga siya. You can always and always file a case po. To say that the product is not covered by warranty is ano po yan, deceptive din po yan. Deceptive sales po yan.
Okay po. Thank you po, Attorney. So, Mr. Ryan po, nasa law na po yan. We have a disclaimer of warranties po. So, you have your right po to complain. Next po, from Mr. Victor. Almost all of delivery companies require customers to pay first the parcel prior to opening. But eventually, the content was not the product which was ordered online. So should the delivery company allowed opening prior to payment, the consumer should have not paid for a product different from what was ordered. Will this qualify as defective sales act or practice, attorney?
Ganito po no, not really in relation to dun sa deceptive sales or unconscionable sales act or practice, pero I think it's more of doon sa yung issue ba is ganito po no, kung yung dineliver the product sa iyo is hindi yun yung in-order mo, you can always and always return it po no. You can always and always return it. Hindi kasi kung ayaw nilang pabuksan sa iyo, hindi ka pa nagbabayad, ang issue ay para bang you're not without redress anyhow. So kung like say for you can still pay, and then when you see that the product is defective, you can always and always return it. We can always and always order yung sellers na yan to refund your payment, and if and in the refund we see that there is unreasonableness towards redressing yung legitimate concern natin. CFTEB po for that matter, nag-impose po tayo ng fees, nag-impose po tayo sa kanila ng fine. So in fact, under the Consumer Act, DTI can impose a fine ranging from 500 pesos to 300,000 pesos po per complaint, no, per transaction po. So kung nakita natin na yung mga ganyan po na practices nila, we see that there's unreasonableness, and when you file a complaint, nakita talaga natin na valid yung complaint natin and hindi nila inactionan on time. Meron na ang tawag dito, kumbaga legitimate naman yung complaint and they fail to give appropriate redress to dun sa legitimate complaints na yan, then we will not hesitate to impose po yung maximum penalty provided for under po ng law.
Okay po, attorney. So, Sir Victor, you have your right po to return the product and file a complaint po if yung product na in-order nyo ay different nga po sa dineliver sa inyo. So, we have, again, from Miss Lori Jane. Do we have jurisdiction on complaints against salon services such as pag nasira yung buhok sa pag-rebond ng buhok ng customer? Attorney?
Ito opinion ko lang po to dyan, no. Si DTI kasi as far as FTEB is concerned, yung mga decisions namin sa mga ganyan na cases, what we do is yung service that kasi si DTI, I think we have to agree na tayo transactional lang tayo. Like see for example, if you pay for the repair, ito yung binayaran mo sa repair, hindi naman siya na repair, then kung magkano lang yung binabayar mo sa repair, yun lang yung ibabalik sa iyo. That's my opinion, no, but I don't know. Minsan kasi depende kasi yan sa the facts and circumstances in every case, no. But insofar as the salon is concerned, kung hindi naman tama yung binigay sa iyo na serbisyo, you can always ask for a refund insofar as what you have been paid, because you're supposed to be entitled to the kind of service that you pay for. If the service hindi maganda, then you can always ask for refund. However, doon kasi sa sinasabi po natin na nasira, baka that might fall po under sa damages already. So I think pagka ganon, it can be a separate na civil case for damages po siguro, because by then kasi you will have to prove really na also yung it's the medicine that they use for the hair, or the lack of skill on the part dun sa but um uh, it depende sa circumstances, depende sa circumstances. But my opinion is transactional lang. What I think we should limit the jurisdiction insofar as refunding the particular amount that was paid in that particular transaction. Because I think yung damages requires a full-blown hearing, na that can be properly threshed out in a regular court, rather than yung DTI. Kasi as far as DTI is concerned, as far as I'm concerned, medyo administrative lang. May administrative yung jurisdiction natin. So that's just my opinion. Of course, yung mga adjudication officers over here, I think each and every case is unique naman. So it really depends on the facts and circumstances of every case. And also dun sa appreciation nung lawyer or adjudication officer who hear out the case. But hindi naman automatic na walang jurisdiction din yung DTI. Hindi rin automatic na merong jurisdiction. Depends really on facts and circumstances.
Okay po, thank you, attorney. So it really depends din po talaga. Pero within DTI po, transactional po ang jurisdiction ni DTI. So sa ating po mga participants, we have still time po to ask questions po. You can still use the raise hand button po to directly ask Attorney Joseph po. So we have another question po. So regarding, I think it's parang medyo parehas lang din po sa tanong ni Miss Lori Jane, may pagkakapareha po. From Louie Ayupan, how about health and beauty cares na may extra gluta drip? Paano Kung walang permit ang clinic to do gluten drip, ano ang laban ni client sa kanila kung namatay ang client because of that? Meron po ba tayong action and monitoring sa ganitong practices, attorney?
Well, ganito no, I think yung issue na to, if you DOH regulates yung mga clinics na to, you have to get I forgot yung term but nakalimutan ko yung term, but there's a yung mga clinics na to should get a permit from FDA if you're going to ano uh, what's this the ECDOH regulates these kinds of clinics, these kinds of establishment, so that if they don't have a permit, they don't have permit from FDA, then those particular yung mga ganito klase na na services are deemed illegal, no? So it can be the subject of a closure as far as FDA is concerned. So I think also yung LGUs has power over them, no, kasi they're supposed to show, yung LGs are supposed to show na regulated sila by FDA before they can actually legally operate these kinds of establishments, no. But kung sino ang may liable, I think dito may liability yung mga establishments na to. But yung ano kasi dito, the issue here kasi is more of ngayon kung napapansin po ninyo, in relation kanina dun sa question ni Sir Saldi, ang issue na ngayon dito is not so much kung niloko ka o hindi, but whether, I think yung issue dito is yung the product itself already. So kung yung product itself already, yung safety ng product, effectiveness ng product para sa akin, baka FDA po yung may jurisdiction nito, DOH po. Yun.
Okay po, attorney. And also, yun nga po yung sinabi ni attorney kanina, si DOH po ang nagla-license sa mga stores na ito. So, as consumers po, let's be aware po and know our responsibilities nga po bilang consumers na we should be aware na if yung mga pupuntahan po nating clinics ay regulated po at licensed po. Next question po from Kevin Klein Hilado. Regarding sa overpriced services ng CASA in terms of change oil and PMS compared sa outside automotive shops. So is this considered a violation? So overpriced services daw po ng CASA.
Well, sorry, to begin with, when we say kasi na overpriced, there should be a parang reference price, no? Unfortunately po kasi, as far as DTI is concerned, and in relation po sa Price Act, meron lang certain goods po na covered by the Price Act, no? So when you sell it above the price, mandated price, or above yung reference price na yun, or let's say for example SRP for that matter, no, doon lang yung mga casas per kasi are na hindi natin talaga nire-regulate yung prices talaga nila. So to begin with, you cannot really say na overpriced, no, kasi when you say overpriced, dapat may reference price na tinatakda ng batas mismo or ng regulating agency. Like say for example gamot, no,
Thank you po, attorney. We have someone who raised their hand po. Serafin Umokit. Sir, good morning po. Hi, Sir
Good
Serafin.
morning.
Yes
Good
po, you
morning.
may ask your question po.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, attorney. Clarification lang po. Ito po ay reklamo about food product. Ganito 'yon. Ang reklamo niya is siya ay isang ah, sole distributor. Kini-claim niya na sole distributor siya ng sinasabing food product. Pero meron siyang natuklasan na nagbebenta ng the same product, ginagamit niya yung packaging, pero yung laman niya iba. So, sa jurisdiction pa natin yun, attorney, yung ganun, sa food. Ang parang nakikita ko na complaint niya is ginagamit yung packaging niya, tapos iba yung quality ng laman ng packaging.
Ah, well, ganito po sir, no? Parang B2B siya no, nagbebenta at saka nagbebenta rin. So hindi naman siya well, what we have to look into in so far as consumer is concerned, meron ba consumer transaction? Bumili ba yung nagrereklamo doon sa nirereklamo niya? Yung sole distributor ba rin bumili ba sa the other distributor? So
Hindi lang.
kung bumili siya, may consumer transaction doon, pwede 'yon. Kasi ang remedy doon kung sakasakali is dahil sinabi niya mali naman yung binigay mo or something, then pwedeng deceptive sales yun, ire-refund mo sa kanya. Pero
Oo.
kung ang issue naman is pinapalabas niya na legit yung binebenta niyang produkto pero hindi naman totoo, then I think that's an IP violation po. Intellectual property, I think that would fall. No? There are other lawyers here. I'm not really an expert in so far as IP is concerned, but I think baka ito is what you call unfair competition. No? I don't know. Merong nakita ko kanina dito si Attorney Aban and other lawyers. No? But I think that's unfair competition as far as I am concerned. Palalabasin mo yung produkto mo, parang gano'n, sa iba. Pagka ang issue po kasi sa unfair competition, then that's not DTI. It's more of a violation ng intellectual property. But the complainant there should be the IP owner. Siya dapat yung may invention, siya dapat yung owner ng product na yon. So you can file a case in court pagka ganyan. So may criminal cases involved saan. But kung may binili siya, may consumer transaction, then DTI has jurisdiction. But dun sa example mo kasi, with the limited facts, no? But I think hindi DTI po kung ang nirereklamo niya is, kung may binili siya, DTI pwede. Re-refund ng DTI yung binayad niya. Pero generally, kung ginagaya yung produkto niya, then IP violation yan. Provided na siya talaga yung IP, but sabi mo kasi na sole distributor lang siya. So I think the IP belongs to doon sa product owner. So I don't know. You're
Clarify ko
from
lang, attorney,
Oo. Oo.
kasi kahapon actually yon pumunta dito sa office. At the same din po yung opinion nyo dun sa sinabi ko. Clarify ko lang kasi baka nagkamali ako sa opinion ko. Kasi nga first time namin ma-encounter yon dito sa Region 2. So tama pala. Tama.
But alam mo sa Reason 2 you have a very good lawyer dyan, si Attorney Cyrus, no? I think he will be very very happy to help you also, and
yun concern namin, attorney, kasi sa amin dito kami work from home yung iba, so hindi kami sabay-sabay pumapasok, and sometimes kung sino yung nandito na CPD personnel, siya po yung mag-handle dun sa customer. Wala kasi
we
si
always
attorney
have to go back.
Okay yun po. Thank you.
So what we're saying is, sorry, what I was saying is you always have to go back to the basics to check meron bang consumer transaction na nangyari.
Yes.
For personal use ba yung binili niya, parang ganun. So pag nakita may consumer transaction din, basically violation yun ng Consumer Act DTI yun. Pero pag